Today on Think Smart with TMFG, Mike and I are going to be discussing the coming recession.
I turned on my computer, the screensaver today was a giant bear. Is that a sign?
That is a sign. Now, let me start the podcast by saying we're not a believer that you can predict the future by any means. But when you're in the middle of something, there are certain signs that you want to start looking for. And I think those signs are starting to come to fruition.
Well, the market is what actually predicts the future, right? And the market is going to give us a little bit of a, let's say, a flare in the sky saying, hey guys, something's about to happen here.
It's pulled back a little bit. So at one point we were looking at, down in the U.S., down 15 to 20%. It's now down closer to 6 or 7%. But there may be another leg to this market pullback. I think leg 2 is still possibly out there.
So when we say a recession, what is a recession? How do we define it?
Well, here's the definition. A significant decline in economic activity spread across the country lasting for more than a few months.
Used to be 2 negative quarters was the rule, right?
It's still the rule.
That's the rule of thumb. And they say significant now. So it's got to be significant enough. I think they changed around during COVID because they didn't think it was significant enough.
So let's look at a couple of other things. First of all, lower GDP. So what is GDP? Gross domestic production. That's looking at an economy, be it Canada, be it the U.S., and the amount of goods and services produced month by month or year by year. If that is going down, then that is a sign that there is a recession possibly in place. Lower real income. So real income, all the income coming into a country, lower employment. So, what's the unemployment rate? If the unemployment rate has gone from 5% to 7%, that's lower employment. Lower industrial production. So industrial production is measured every month. Is industrial production going up or is it going down? Is it at capacity or is it well below capacity? Some obvious ones, lower wholesale, retail sales. Those are other signs that a recession might be coming. And Mike said 2 quarters. That's really what you're looking at. So 2-3 month periods where you've had back-to-back negatives.
Well, the tricky thing is you can't identify a recession until you've been through those 2 negative quarters. When they say we've hit a recession, that's not the start of the recession. You already have to be 6 months into the recession by the time it's there. And the reality is, I think the average recession only lasts 1 year.
Right.
And by the time you know you're in one, you're already halfway through it.
And we could be in one right now. I mean, maybe the first quarter we weren't in a recession, but this second quarter we could possibly already be in a recession. We're nearing the end of April right now.
If Trump has his way.
So why might this possible recession be somewhat delayed? Number one, Donald Trump's only been in power for 100 days. He hasn't even hit his 100th day yet, but he's really close. Any longer, and there's probably going to be a recession. He tipped the markets off about the tariffs. Now, he basically said, we're going to start tariffing everyone. So if you're a manufacturer or you're a retailer and you know you might be facing tariffs on the goods you're selling or the goods you're bringing in, what are you going to do?
And hold off. Or, well, you have 2 choices. You can either stock up before the tariffs, is one choice, or you can try to make decisions on where you're going to buy from. But there's probably a lot of stocking up going.
Well, I think that's what it is. So what happened is the retailers brought in more goods because they could bring them in cheaper. Anyone doing business to business, they shipped more goods. So if we were going to suddenly face a 25% tariff on goods going from Canada to the U.S., basically they shipped all the goods pre-tariffs, just in case. And it was good business planning to do that. But what does that do? That makes the economy looks like it's actually doing really well. What I think you're going to start to see come May and June is that will start to drop off, and it's going to start to have a real impact.
I know this is going to be a bit of a sidebar here in this podcast, but that's what they're for. Something's really gone wrong with all governments with this idea of tipping off. Remember in Canada when they changed the trust rules, the taxation? It happened at 5:30 at night, so no one could have an advantage. It was not released.
Right.
It used to be whenever you're going to make a change that significantly affects people, it had to be done after hours so everyone had the same ability to go and react to it and couldn't go and mess with the markets that day. So everyone had an equal chance. This whole government, the U.S. is horrendously bad. They're just making announcements, tipping some people off, not tipping some other people off. Even the Canadian government will go back with all these changes and rules they've made, they flip-flop back and forth.
Even before they were legal.
Yeah, but it's insanity now. No one knows how to react to anything, which creates, again, these problems in the marketplace are going to be created by this stuff.
So, next sign of a recession is layoffs. So if you look south of the border, we haven't seen a lot in Canada, a little bit. Unfortunately, we lost the great Hudson's Bay Company. Actually used to work there for about 6 years, met my wife there. So, it's got a place in my heart. But in the U.S., we saw the U.S. government slash. They have lost up to 300,000 people from the U.S. government employees. And, some took early retirement, but that's still a loss of employment. And about 120,000 couldn't take early retirement. They were just let go. So that's huge. Some departments bigger than others. Here's some companies that have also done layoffs. Starbucks, Blue Origin, Chevron, Estee Lauder, JP Morgan Chase, Kohl's, Meta, Southwest Airlines, Workday, CNN, Forever 21, and Intel.
And these are companies that aren't in trouble. They're in pretty good financial shape.
Pretty good shape.
But again, the recessions take a while, and it's a build. And these are the signs that something is starting to happen.
So let's look at the layoffs in technology companies, because a year ago they were all the rage. We've already seen Meta, which is Facebook, start to do some company layoffs. Microsoft has conducted performance-based layoffs starting in January. Google is conducting layoffs as well. So 3 of those top companies, and that's going to have a ripple effect. It's not just the people that get laid off, it's the people that are providing services to all of those companies. They get an impact as well.
And what are the reasons behind it? I mean, number one is economic headwinds. They know what they're running into. This is going to be a rough year coming forward. Let's make sure we're lean going into this. No one wants to go into a recession fat. You want to be lean, right? And that's what they're trying to do. They're cost cutting, they're shifting priorities. Also, you have AI automation coming in. If they can replace jobs with AI, they're going to do it. And again, these companies are very smart and they need to be prepared for this. The problem when you do layoffs, it's very difficult when you're trying to do them after the fact because layoffs are initially expensive, right? When you let someone go, it's going to cost you some money up front. So if they can do that now and be better prepared for 6 months from now, they're going to go through that process.
So companies aren't different than humans. If we see some headwinds coming our way, maybe management's talking about layoffs, people start to look at their spending, watch their expenses, and try and protect their income as best as possible. The goal is the difference between your income and your expenses, your profit. Companies are always trying to protect their profit. So if they're expecting lower revenue, lower sales, the only option they have is to reduce expenses.
Yep.
And good companies do that. That's how you survive a recession. Bad companies keep spending, don't pay any attention, assuming everything will be all right, and before you know what, it isn't.
And again, this time is a bit different because, some of the things you see, this is almost a created recession, which is there probably would have been a recession anyway, even if all this stuff
At some point, yeah.
At some point there would have been a recession. We know that. But this one was really created by tariffs because tariffs are going to lead to higher prices, right? And that's going to be inflation. Inflation leads to higher interest rates. Whenever you put all these different things together, at the end of the day, people have less money to spend. Your average person is going to have a higher mortgage, and the stuff they have left over to spend at the end of the day is going to be a lot less. So the amount of goods they can buy is going to be greatly reduced. So, their money may go 25% to tariffs now and 75% to goods. But tariffs are not part of GDP, right? When you look at GDP growth, that doesn't include the tariffs. So when you take that 25% that's going to the tariffs, that's not going to be in a country's GDP. That's not a product. That's a tax.
So let's give a recent example. Mike and I were happened to be down in Florida. We have a condo we've had for many years, and we hadn't been down for a few years. It's mostly a rental condo, but it was time for us to get down and fix the place up a little bit. One of the places we went to was Dollar General. And you go into that store and you realize that none of those goods are made in the USA.
Yeah.
They're all imported goods, which is why they're able to sell them for $1 or maybe a little more.
So it's going to be a bucket a quarter General now, is it?
Well, if tariffs are there,
yep.
they have to go up. They got to go up by 25%.
Yep.
So even something as small as that, you're going to see inflationary pressure in something as simple as Dollar General. You're going to see it across the board. If there's tariffs coming from Mexico and from Canada into the U.S., the price of groceries is going to go up with all the goods that are coming in from Mexico. Price of lumber, aluminum, all that stuff's going to go up in the U.S. And if the U.S. starts to feel it, what happens?
We feel it.
Everybody else starts to feel it. Mexico starts to feel it. Canada starts to feel it. So what will this lead to? Higher inflation. Higher inflation, what do governments do to combat higher inflation?
They raise interest rates.
So we've been lucky. Our interest rates have dropped a fair bit because inflation was coming in under control in Canada. There's a good chance it starts going back the other way. Next up, what's happening with retail sales, Mike?
Been a decline in most department stores. We saw about a 1.7% decrease in restaurants and bars. So people were not spending as much money on nights out. We saw a drop in gasoline stations, but I think that might be due to lowering gas prices. But again, lowering gas prices, it means there is a slowdown expected. That's why gas prices go lower. Meanwhile, sales were up on online and health stores, rising between, online was up 2.4% and health stores was up 1.7%.
So maybe they're ordering online, so they're not spending as much on gas.
Yep.
Well, makes sense, right?
Yep.
And they're not shopping in department stores. So let's have a look at a couple of things. The last three big recessions that we faced, last one was 2007 to 2009. That was called the Great Recession.
Yep.
That had a huge impact everywhere in the world. 2000 to 2001 was the dot-com bubble burst, big recession at that time. And then again in 1990 to 1991, the Gulf War started, and we had really high interest rates at that time. We've given some doom and gloom. So let's step back. Let's look at what a recession is. So the normal economy is operating at 100%. If it's operating at 102%, it's in a growth phase. If it's operating at 98%, it's in a recession. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm operating any day at 98%, I'm pretty happy. I'm really happy when I'm at 102%, but I'm certainly not depressed when I'm at 98%. But understand the press is going to make a big deal of this, and they're going to make it worse.
Recessions are not unhealthy. They have to happen, and they always have happened, and always will happen. So people always say, is there ever going to become a recession? Of course there is. There will be many upcoming recessions. This will be one, we'll get through it, and then we'll wait for the next one.
So let's give you some strategies on what you could personally do to prepare for the possible upcoming recession. Number one, double check your emergency fund. Either have cash in the bank, cash in a money market fund, or access to money in a line of credit. Some people will say 6 to 12 months. I think 3 months is probably a great starting point for most. If you set this goal too high, you'll never achieve it, but start with 3 months. So make sure you have access to additional capital somehow, some way.
If you can reduce debt, start to do it. Interest rates are going to go up with this. So if that's the case, you want to have less debt, particularly non-deductible debt.
So if you got a mortgage, take that $10,000, $5,000 you might get back from a tax refund. We're in April right now. People are starting to get their refunds back if they're receiving refunds. Take that $5,000, put it towards, certainly credit card debt would be number one if you have any of that evil stuff. But secondly would be mortgages, lines of credit, pay it down. What's up next?
Diversify your income sources, as much as you can.
If your household is falling behind, it may be time to look at how you might be able to increase that income. Part-time jobs, things like that. If you're in that situation, you need to do that. Most of our clients don't face that, but we know some of them do.
If you're spending money on golf, go work at a golf course for a day and get free golf at night. There's things that a lot of our senior clients do and enjoy quite a bit, and it gives them some enjoyment and gives them extra money in their pocket.
Reassess and look at your budget. There may be some extra stuff in your budget. Maybe you don't need all those streaming services. Maybe you only need one music provider. I know right now I've got iTunes and I've got, Apple Music, and I've got Spotify, but I probably really only go to one.
Yep.
And even some of the streaming services. Just look at anything you might be able to cut back a bit.
They all like to get you on that credit card's regular payment plan because no one ever cancels, right?
No, for sure. From an investment point of view, make sure your portfolio is properly balanced. You might have too much in equities right now. And if we are going to have a recession, even a bigger recession, the market will drop even more. So make sure that portfolio is properly balanced so you're not hit quite as badly. And, every little increment is going to help a bit. Yep. What about for business owners, Mike? Is there anything a business owner could do
Cash is king, so make sure you have decent cash flows. Try to make sure speed up your receivables, because sometimes during a recession your receivables become bad debt. So you want to get that stuff in before anything goes wrong. And you can slow down payables if needed. Cut non-essential expenses. I mean, just go take a look at your business. Again, the same as we said, look at home. Look at what you have going in your business. Things get just automatic payments, and you just keep on paying them even though they're not using them anymore.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about our business. So if the market is down 5%, we know our profits, our income coming in is down roughly 10%.
Yeah.
If the market's down 10%, we're down 20%. So we actually have a plan what expenses we could possibly look to reduce based on what the market's doing, because we know we're going to be impacted by it.
So if you're getting cheap coffee when you come into our office, you don't even have to ask how your portfolio is
Right?
doing.
If there's no cookies there the next time you come in, you'll know what's going on.
There's no Coke and there's President's Choice Cola. You're going to be in a bad marketplace.
For businesses, this is probably a little more difficult to do, but diversify your client base. Diversify your different income sources. Maybe there's something else you could add in that's not going to be impacted by the market as much.
They say focus on your core products and services. We call this the hedgehog approach, which means you do what you do really well and just focus on that.
Next up, maintain strong relationships with your suppliers and your lenders. You don't want them to call you. You just want to check in with them. We're doing great. Things are good. Is everything good from your end with our business? You don't want to get that mystery phone call saying, we're going to call in your line of credit. So let's go to the one other one. I thought this was an interesting one. A special tip for business owners. What's the first thing most businesses do if a recession hits?
Unfortunately, they usually cut the marketing budget.
So for those who are in marketing, that's probably not a good thing. Does that make sense that you cut the marketing budget first?
Not really. Without sales, you have more issues.
Well, the way I look at it is if everyone else is stopping marketing, it's probably a pretty good time to market.
Yeah.
Right? You may have actually better market penetration during a recession because everybody else has stopped marketing. So there are some strategies for businesses, for personal, that you can do if we happen to hit a possible recession. That's the end of our podcast. This is Rob and Mike with Think Smart from the McClelland Financial Group of Asante Capital Management.